Welcome to the Silverthorne Pulse. I'm Kim Jardim with the town of Silverthorne, and I'm here today with Town Manager Ryan Highland, and we're going to do a recap of the February 22nd, 2023 council meeting. So let's jump right in.
All right. Thanks, Kim.
So let's start off with what we call staff comments. And there were some police service awards given out during the meeting by the Mayor Anne Marie Sandquist.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, some commendations from the police chief and also meritorious life-saving awards. And so we had a couple of instances, and we had 4 of our officers, including one of our sergeants, respond to those. So the first was an infant who was in distress, and they were able to save that life. And so, celebrating that work that they do, as you mentioned, with some recognition from the police chief and the mayor. And so, second instance was a suicide attempt, which also fortunately had an outcome where that individual survived, and as the mayor said last night, had a second chance at life. And so, celebrating the work again of our officers and sergeants. So that was officers Pitney, Crochelle, Costa, and Sergeant Hosier, who were recognized. And so their colleagues and other town staff and some family members there to recognize that work.
Both of those individuals were given a second chance at life, and it's important to recognize the work that our police officers and our sergeants do because it can be really, really difficult at times. Yeah,
those are some extremely stressful calls that they respond to, and fortunately these had good endings.
Great. Moving on to consent calendar. The Silverthorne Housing Guidelines Amendment, my understanding is that was approved, guidelines for housing.
That was. So the Silverthorne Housing Guidelines are something that, in addition to the deed restrictions that are on workforce housing, provide policy direction on the lotteries that are held when units are available, and a lot of other details. And so they get amended fairly frequently. It's a living document, and this particular instance was getting the Solarado townhomes lined up from a policy perspective with the way that we have approached the entirety of the Smith Ranch neighborhood, those 200 units. So that was the latest amendment. Council is going to continue a conversation about families versus individuals, and always trying to make sure that they're being equitable, and future work sessions, they'll continue to talk about the housing guidelines, in particular, like I said, how we're treating families versus individuals. So always more to come on the housing guidelines, but lining up Solarado with Smith Ranch from a policy perspective was what was accomplished at the meeting.
Great. And that's the property right along the bike path, just on the Silverthorne-Dillon town line,
right,
correct?
So where the switchbacks are on the trail heading up, Solarado is there. The history on Solarado, that was a project that came into being through the annexation way back when of Summit Sky. And so the developer of the Summit Sky neighborhood provided those units for workforce. Great.
During public hearings, also some housing topics. The Smith Ranch Workforce Housing Apartments, one resolution approving a minor subdivision, another resolution approving the final site plan for the Smith Ranch Housing Apartments.
Yeah, this is a town project in partnership with Gorman, is the developer that we are working with. And while it is one comprehensive project, from a financing perspective for Gorman, we split that into 2 because there are 2 kind of distinct components. So that's why we had 2 different items on the agenda for council. And so the distinction between the components there, one of those is a LIHTC, or low income tax housing credit project. And so that is 65 units in that particular building, and that's broken down into 27 one-bedroom units, 25 two-bedroom units, and 13 three-bedroom units. So LIHTC is a 30 to 60% AMI, area media income development, and so that's essentially one half of what was approved. And then the other half is what we're calling just traditional workforce, and that is aimed at 80 to 120% area median income. These are both rental developments, and so the workforce 80 to 120% is split into two separate buildings. So when we're looking at the overall project, we've got 3 buildings out there, 1 for LIHTC, 2 for the 80 to 120 AMI. So I mentioned the breakdown of bedrooms in the LIHTC building, and then in those 2 workforce buildings, there are 52 one-bedroom units and then 18 three-bedroom units. So across the entirety of that development, 135 units, all workforce deed-restricted rental. And so council approved the site plan on both of those. This was the final site plan, and so some of the changes from the preliminary, which we talked about a few months ago, a lot of changes to architecture and really making it a more architecturally interesting development, a place that people can be proud to live in, and that the community who we're all investing in that through tax dollars can be proud of as well. So we've got some visuals that were shared at the council meeting, which we can show here as well, that give you a sense of what that will look like when it's complete. And so we are working on getting in the ground this spring with Gorman, and as with all things in the mountain environment, about a 24-month build. And so early on in 2025 is when we would be doing some ribbon cuttings and having folks moving in. So
Fantastic.
Very exciting,
Yes.
very much needed, and a great partnership with Gorman and bringing this to fruition.
Great. And just to back up a moment and talk about area median income, that's a method to identify eligibility for this housing.
Right.
And when you talk about someone making 80% of AMI, just so people understand what AMI is, the area median income means that half of the families earn more than that amount, that area median income, and half of the families earn less than
Right.
that amount.
And
so
if-
it's the middle ground
Yeah, and
is
if-
the starting point.
If folks are interested in getting an understanding of where they would land in that spectrum, it is a document that you can find on the Summit Combined Housing Authority's website. Gets updated annually, and yeah, there's a big chart that identifies, the percentages and how that varies per household size. So yeah, it's a very specific formula, so you can know exactly where you would land. There are some nuances to when we've talked about Smith Ranch, the existing for sale product. You can go a little bit beyond the AMI, 80 to 120% AMI to qualify. We could do a whole show about kind of some of the nuances, and some of that's in the housing guidelines that we spoke about earlier. But yeah, 135 units, ranging from 30% AMI all the way to 120 is what will come online in about 24 months.
Fantastic. Well, believe it or not, that actually wraps up our meeting for February 22nd,
We had one more.
2023.
We had one more. We have a hotel.
Oh, we do. Absolutely. The Element Hotel.
Element Hotel.
Yes.
So Element Hotel is something that has been before council in a variety of different forms numerous times. Actually, I think the first land use proposal that they saw for the Element Hotel was about almost 5 years ago. And we've had, I think, some ownership changes and COVID and different things going on. But this was the final site plan. This one made it across the finish line. And so, let me see, how many rooms is that? So that's a 147 room hotel. And just to orient people on the location, this is the same ownership group as the Hampton Inn. and this would be constructed adjacent to the Hampton Inn. And like I said, final site plan approval, and so they'll obviously need a building permit and some of those other pieces, but from a development land use review, they crossed the finish line with Planning Commission last week, and then last night with the Town Council. So, we mentioned earlier in the show those switchbacks that head up to the reservoir. One of the things that will be a part of this development is connecting to that. So right about in the middle of the switchbacks, you'll have an offshoot, and so there's a bit of a social trail there right now. This will formally connect through Formal Trail, not just the Element Hotel, but all of the Summit Place Shopping Center essentially will be able to connect through there. So kind of similar story from preliminary approval to the final that we talked about with the Smith Ranch project. A lot of tweaks to architecture from the preliminary site, making sure that there's articulation in the building. Another significant change from the preliminary approval for this was a parking lot that is adjacent to kind of the Solarado development that we talked about, and providing a lot more of a buffer between the parking lot and a much more robust landscape plan on that end. So we can pop some of those images up on the screen, but that is the Element Hotel, 147 rooms that will be under construction, I'm assuming sometime this summer they'll get moving.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, that said, that is our entire council meeting for February 22nd. We did want to speak to our upcoming First Friday. We will be sponsoring a rail jam on the Silverthorne Performing Arts Center lawn. It's an amateur competition between skiers, snowboarders, and always a lot of fun. Yeah,
$10 if you want to be a part of that competition. It's the 6th annual event, and so it's pretty popular. I think this year we've got Frisco Funk Collective that'll be playing on the stage out there. So yeah, First Friday coming up.
Excellent. And also just a reminder to everyone out there that we do have a council vacancy at this time, and we are accepting letters of interest to our town clerk by March 9th at 5 p.m.
Right. We have received 5 letters of interest so far, and so got a bit more time. Like you said, March 9th is the deadline, so if anybody in Silverthorne meets the criteria, which is you've lived in Silverthorne for a year and you are a registered voter by the time of that appointment, council's looking for letters of interest and resumes, so send that into the town clerk, email on the website, or pop it by town hall. I think we've said maybe don't mail it. We're just not terribly confident in the speed of our postal service these days. We're working on that, but yeah, if you want to serve your community, we've got a council seat that's open. And there will be a brief interview period and then an appointment by the March 22nd council meeting. Yeah, I think the schedule is on March 20th. We will line up interviews. Council will interview candidates, and then the appointment scheduled for a few days after that on the 22nd. Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.